Level 0. The drain. The whirlpool you have built 1,000 times and never once watched. You pull the plug in the bath and the water starts to turn. Somebody has told you that which way it turns depends on which half of the planet you are standing on. It is a good story. The honest version is stranger. The Coriolis effect is real. It is also almost unbelievably weak at this size. In a bathtub, it runs about 30 millionths as strong as gravity. Everything else in that water beats it. How you filled the tub, how you moved your leg 20 minutes ago, the exact shape of the hole. Quick thing before we go deeper, if you are into this, subscribe, like, and drop a comment. It genuinely helps the channel. So in 1962, an MIT professor named Asher Shapiro decided to remove everything else. He built a circular tank 6 feet across and 6 inches deep, filled it, covered it, and left it undisturbed for 24 hours. Then he pulled the plug. For the first 12 to 15 minutes, nothing. Then the water began to turn counterclockwise, and by the end it was making a full turn every 3 to 4 seconds. 3 years later, Lloyd Trefethen ran the same experiment in Sydney. It turned clockwise. So the myth is true. It just needs a full day of perfect silence, and your bathroom has never given it that. Underneath it is one rule. Water spins faster as it loses room to move. And that rule does not stay polite when you hand it more water. Level 1. The drowning machine. That is not a nickname somebody made up online. That is what engineers call it. Picture a low concrete wall across a river, maybe waist high. Water slides over the top in a smooth sheet, and the surface below looks like a ripple. People drive over these on bridges without ever glancing down. Kids fish off them. Underneath that ripple, the water pours over the edge, curls back on itself, and runs in a closed loop that does not let go. A life jacket does not help. It holds you in the loop. Strength does not help either. Rescuers have watched people get pulled under, pushed back to the surface, and pulled under again in the same spot over and over. Researchers at Brigham Young University built the first national inventory of these. They found more than 13,000 of them across the United States, and more than 1,000 recorded drownings. Here's the number that should not be true. Over the last 50 years, these little walls have killed more people in America than every major dam failure in the same period, combined. Some states have started tearing them out. Not because they failed, because they worked exactly as designed, and the thing they build underneath is worse than the flooding they were meant to stop. The deadliest one on this whole list is the one that looks like nothing. Now let the ocean try. Level 2. Saltstraumen. The strongest tidal current on the planet, and it fits under a bridge. In northern Norway, near the town of Bodo, the tide has to move an enormous volume of seawater through a gap that is 255 meters wide over a sill only 26 meters deep. 4 times a day, the ocean tries to squeeze through anyway. The water comes through at over 20 knots. That is the fastest tidal current ever measured anywhere on Earth. And the whirlpools it throws off are about 10 meters across. 10 meters. You could park 2 cars in one. The most powerful tidal current in the world produces a vortex you could throw a rope across, and it will still take a boat down because the danger was never the width. People stand on the bridge and watch it happen. Fishermen work it on purpose because the same violence that pulls the water through also drags cod into the strait, and it is some of the best fishing in Norway. So the fastest one is nearly the smallest one, which means size and strength are 2 different questions, and from here on we are only asking one of them. Level 3. Naruto. The whirlpool with a published timetable. Between the island of Shikoku and Awaji Island in Japan, there is a gap about 1 3/10 kilometers wide. On one side, the Pacific. On the other, the Sado Inland Sea. The two of them sit at different heights for most of the day, and the water between them has to fix that. Twice a day it does, at roughly 20 kilometers an hour, throwing whirlpools around 20 meters across. Tour boats are built specifically to ride through them. There is an observation walkway with a glass floor directly above. People book tickets months out, and this is the part that changes how you look at it. None of this is chaos. It runs on the moon. Locals can tell you which hour of which day will be the strongest before it has happened, because the tide has been keeping that appointment for longer than Japan has been a country. Predictable is not the same as safe. It just means the water tells you when. 20 meters gets you a tourist attraction. Double it and you get a legend instead. Level 4. Moskstraumen. Every other whirlpool on this list is named after a place. This one gave the rest of them their word. Off the Lofoten Islands in Norway, between Moskstraumen and Værøy, the tide runs across open sea instead of through a channel. Sailors avoided it for centuries and told stories about it for just as long. Edgar Allan Poe dropped a fisherman into it in 1841. Jules Verne finished a novel by steering a submarine into it. The word maelstrom came out of this water and into English, and every other whirlpool on Earth borrowed it. The stories described a bottomless funnel that swallowed ships whole. Instruments eventually got out there and measured something different. Currents near 28 kilometers an hour, throwing vortices 40 to 50 meters wide, with standing waves and violent broken water rather than one clean hole in the sea. The legend got the shape wrong. It did not get the danger wrong. Scotland has its own version at Corryvreckan, slower than this one at 16 kilometers an hour, and still counted among the most dangerous navigable waters anywhere because of what the seafloor is doing underneath it. 50 meters of spinning water was enough to scare Europe for 600 years. Now let us find the one that is half again as wide and has been sitting quietly on the American border the whole time. Level 5. Old Sow, the largest whirlpool in the Western Hemisphere, and it has children. It sits in Passamaquoddy Bay between Deer Island in New Brunswick and Moose Island in Eastport, Maine. It is on an international border. You could stand in one country and watch it turn in the other. Twice a day, the tide swings about 6 meters here, and all of that water has to move around a seamount on the bottom. What comes up is a spiral roughly 76 meters across, about 250 feet, ringed by smaller vortices that spin off the edges. Locals call those the piglets, which is where the whole thing got its name. You hear it before you see it. It makes a low, grinding roar, and generations of fishermen have used that sound the way other people use a weather report. And that is the ceiling, not for whirlpools. For whirlpools that make noise, throw spray, and behave the way the word makes you expect. Everything on this list so far has had a shoreline you could stand on and a sound you could hear. The last one has neither, and it is bigger than all of them put together by a factor you are not going to like. Level 6. The Eddy, the largest whirlpools on Earth, and no human being has ever seen one. You could sail directly through the middle of one and notice nothing. No funnel, no roar, no spray. The sea would look exactly like sea. The entire structure turns so slowly and so wide that from a deck it is simply the ocean. Off the coast of Alaska, the Gulf of Alaska spins off what oceanographers call Haida eddies. They can run more than 250 kilometers across. Not meters, kilometers. They come loose in late winter, about 5 or 6 of them in an average year, and then they leave. They drift west at around 2 kilometers a day. They can hold together for 2 full years, crossing more than 1,000 kilometers of open Pacific, and they take the coast with them. Each one carries a mass of warm, fresher, nutrient-loaded coastal water roughly equal to the volume of Lake Michigan, and hauls it out into the deep ocean along with the plankton, the fish, and the entire small ecosystem living inside it. The only reason we know they exist is satellites. They measure the sea surface height, and an eddy shows up as a bulge a few centimeters tall spread across a couple hundred kilometers. A few centimeters. That is the entire signature of the biggest rotating structure on this planet. The same rule that emptied a bathtub, given an ocean, and no walls at all. So here's a question for you. The strongest current on Earth makes a whirlpool 10 meters wide. The biggest whirlpool on Earth barely seems to move. Which of those two would you actually call violent? Drop it in the comments and tell me what you want measured next.